moment, but let's take you first of all to Annecy, where the French Prime Minister is giving a statement. Let's see if we can listen in related to the knife attack in Annecy a little earlier today.
Et je voudrais aussi remercier les secours, les soignants qui ont immédiatement pris en charge les blessés et qui sont encore actuellement en train de les
took
prendre en
charge
charge.
of the
Alors l'enquête
injured.
permettra de préciser
Our inquest
le parcours, le profil
will allow us
de
to
ces assaillants et naturellement la
examine
lumière devra être faite.
the
Mais aujourd'hui, c'est le temps
background
de
of this
l'émotion
assailant
et nous
and
sommes ici avec le
shed
ministre
light
de
on all
l'Intérieur,
the
aux côtés
details.
des habitants d'Annecy, pour
We are
exprimer tout le
absolutely
soutien
shaken
et
by
toute
all
la
this,
solidarité de la
and we
nation.
are standing firm by all the inhabitants of Annecy. The state prosecutor is conducting this inquest, and I invite her to take the floor now. We have launched a criminal investigation into this massacre. The person in question is arrested and in the police station at Annecy. There doesn't seem to be any kind of terrorist motivation, at least apparently. We have no evidence as to terrorist motivation. And what we are talking about are 4 minors and 2 adults. The children are in a very severe state and are in the intensive care. One of the victims has been lightly injured, and when the police arrived, the assailant had a knife, so the inquest is proceeding to determine the circumstances in which the police were using firearms. And as I said, there is no indication as to motivation of the assailant yet. It is much too soon to say anything precise today, but we do have the first elements of some kind of inquest. Right, well, on the face of it, at this stage, we're talking about a Syrian national who has refugee status in Sweden and who applied for asylum in France. But this was overridden by the Swedish one, which dates from 10 years back. This person in question has no criminal record, and neither does he have any kind of psychiatric record. He has one child who is the same age as the children he attacked. Well, I just want to intervene here. We're talking about a child of 22 months, of 3 years. The incident happened at a playground. All the victims have been cared for, and all the witnesses who weren't injured are being cared for. They are in a state of shock and being looked after by an emergency medical team. I have to say that we are talking here about infants, very young infants who have been very seriously injured. And I think that everyone who is a parent, all of us are terrifically shocked by this event. It is a terrible thing that's happened. I intervened as soon as possible to make sure that everybody was being cared for and looked after. And of course, everybody in administration is going to be looking at the refugee status of this individual. As I said, he has refugee status from Sweden, and therefore, because Sweden is part of the EU, he can come to France without any particular permission. But I think the most important message is one of solidarity with the children, the 6 victims, and the parents of those children as well. I just want to underline again how shocked we all are.
So there we hear further details of the knife attack in Annecy a little earlier today. Just to reiterate some of what we heard there, the French Prime Minister Élisabeth Borne saying the country is absolutely shaken. We also heard from the public prosecutor who said an investigation has now been launched. She said the attacker had been arrested. He is now in a police station in Annecy. She said there is no terrorist motivation that they are aware of right now. But interestingly, we're starting to get a few more details about the attacker himself. We're told he is a Syrian national. He had refugee status in Sweden. The Prime Minister making it clear there he'd been granted that 10 years ago, so 10-year Swedish refugee status. She said he has no criminal record and no psychiatric record. So she says he also has one child who is the same age as the children who were attacked this morning in that park. They are unclear as yet about the motivation of the assailant. They say it is still far too soon to be able to talk about anything precise. But crucially, we've also had an update as well on the condition of those who were attacked. Confirmation there were 4 minors, 4 children and 2 adults involved in that attack. We assume one is the elderly man who was attacked as he was on the outside of that park, and the other adult, of course, the attacker himself, the man with the knife. She makes it clear, the Prime Minister explaining that those children are in a critical condition. She said they remain in intensive care. The knife attacker was lightly injured, police telling us that they were able to shoot him at the scene before bringing him into custody. So that investigation now getting underway. The public prosecutor saying an inquest has now been opened. They have a lot of the evidence and a lot of the details that they need so far, given that so much of it was able to be covered in this way with video from eyewitnesses and also testimony that we've been reporting today. But clearly as well that police were able to get to that scene so quickly. There are reports that they were there almost immediately to be able to react to that attack this morning. Also confirmation too that of the children who were attacked with the knife, one is a Dutch national, one is a British national. Those the latest details we have about the children who were caught up in that knife attack whilst on a playground in Annecy earlier today. Let's bring in our France correspondent now, Hugh Schofield, who's joining me from Paris. And Hugh, we've been discussing the details that are emerging and interestingly too, a little further information in that press conference, particularly related to the assailant himself, a Syrian national with a 10-year Swedish refugee status. And the Prime Minister making it clear that means he was able to move to France without the need for any special permissions or visas.
Indeed, this is what had been coming out on local media, and she's just confirmed all that this man had initially applied for refugee status in Sweden, and he'd got it 10 years ago, and then he'd come to France a few months ago and had applied for refugee status here. But as she said, that was a pointless exercise on his part because having Swedish refugee status meant that he could travel around Europe. And it may be that he didn't quite understand the situation, but he had applied for refugee status, it seems, here in France as well. But it was a kind of vain gesture because he was quite entitled to travel around Europe as a member, as part of the European Union. So there's that, but that which ties into this aspect of this, which is intriguing and may well be essential to the investigation, which is his family back in Sweden, and the wife that he left there, the 3-year-old daughter that he left there, and the circumstances of that departure. Was it an acrimonious departure? Was there a split? How destabilized was he by all of that and the loss of his daughter, if that's what it was? I mean, these are all things we're going to find out more about in the days to come, I'm sure. But the truth is that they're not looking into a terrorist motivation for all of this, which means that they have to find some other motivation, and it seems to be much more likely that it is a psychological motivation. And certainly their first suspicion will be that there is a link with the breakup of his family and his obsession with his daughter, and the fact that he so clearly targeted young children here must be significant.
Yes, and those are the interesting details, the important details, aren't they? The French Prime Minister adding that the suspect had one child of his own, the same age as the children he attacked. And you say there, potential motives, potential maybe reasoning behind this, but they pointed out he has no criminal record and no psychiatric record.
Yeah, so it doesn't fit into any of the kind of classic categories when attacks, knifings have happened in the past, where we immediately find out in general that, X had, a record of petty crime, that he drifted into Islamism, and that he took lots and lots of cannabis and marijuana. None of that seems to apply here. Instead, we have a man who has left behind a family in Sweden and a 3-year-old daughter, and is seen muttering him to himself by the park, in the days preceding this terrible attack. And, one is sort of almost led by the nose into kind of speculation that this is a man fixated about the happiness of these children who you can see in front of him, and his own misery, and a kind of morbid sense of self-pity and self-hatred and all the rest of it takes over him, and this is what he does. It's cod psychology in my part, but I can see that is shaping up as a potential explanation.
Hugh, it's good to have that update from you. Thanks very much, Hugh Schofield there, joining us live from Paris, and we will follow events there very closely if there are any further details. We're going to leave the details on the side of the screen should you need any more, and there's much more, of course, on the BBC Live page that is up and running on the website if you are away from the television.